the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday night. Hope everybody is having a great, long, extended weekend, Thanksgiving weekend. All right, great time of the year, particularly here in Puerto Rico, where the sun is shining and it's hot outside and the ocean is just gorgeous. It's been a little rougher the last couple of days, but generally just beautiful. And yeah, life is good. In spite of all the negativity you're going to hear from me today. Life is good, so I hope you guys are enjoying it. That's your job. Your job in life is to enjoy life. All right. Jose says yesterday while listening to your show, he saw a smash and grab happen across the street. All right, we'll get to smash and grab in a minute. It's God. I don't know how come the smash and grab stuff is not at the top of all the headlines all the time, every day, because the rest of this is everything else in the news is insignificant as comparison. All right, but at the top of the news everywhere is this new strain of COVID, the Omicron, which I guess is a Greek alphabet letter or something like that, Latin something. Anyway, this is the new variant of COVID coming out of South Africa. South Africa is seeing a significant spike in COVID after months of pretty stable numbers. The spike is attributed to this new variant of COVID. The variant has already escaped Africa. Its significant numbers have already been, UK I think has 2 or 3, and rest of Europe, and there's strong suspicious and likelihood that it's already in the United States. It's already spread all over the world. But what do governments do? What do the idiots in power and those who advise them do? Because it makes them look like they're doing something. Trump did this in March of last year. Biden is doing it now. The Brits, the Europeans are all doing it. Shut down the borders. Too late, guys. Virus is already here. Virus is already spreading locally. Who the hell? Just stop running our lives. Stop dictating what we can and cannot do. I'm upset because the Brits have now decided that in order to come into the UK, you are going to have to go into isolation. No matter whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, you go into isolation, then get a PCR test, and only when you get the negative test results on the PCR test can you go out of isolation. You know, given now the demand for PCR tests, who knows how long that will be. That basically destroys all my plans, which I had for travel. I just bought tickets to go to the UK in January as part of a European tour. It's just so, they have no respect for our lives, no respect for our liberty, no respect for our freedom, no respect for our ability to make choices for ourselves. Anyway, the virus, this new variant is already spreading around the world. It looks like it's very, very contagious. It's spreading fast. There was a plane that came in from South Africa into the Netherlands that I was reading an article that said 61 of the people on the plane tested positive for this new variant, which is bizarre to get those kind of numbers. They didn't get it on the plane. They got it before they got it on the plane. But to get it in those numbers means that it's pretty prevalent in South Africa itself. So the numbers are very high. Can't go to Africa because Biden has banned all travel to Africa. So again, our commanders-in-chief, the people who command our lives are dictating where we can and cannot go and how we can and cannot, where, how, what. Anyway, so it's time we adopted a new metric. Case numbers are not important. Indeed, COVID is endemic. We're probably all going to get it at some point. The only thing that's important is how many people die from this and what are the demographics of those who die from it. And maybe, is it overwhelming the hospital system? That's it. The only thing that matters is, how many people are going to ICU and how many people are dying. Case numbers are insignificant. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares how many people get a disease. The question is, how deadly is this disease? Now, usually with viruses, as they mutate, they become more transmittable and less potent, less deadly. Particular if you're vaccinated, that makes you less deadly. The vaccine, even for a mutated virus, is probably going to make it less harmful to you. And at some point, we're just going to have to let it go. We should have, you could argue, done this already. Remember the lockdowns in March of last year? Flatten the curve for the hospitals. Not to achieve 0 cases. That could have never been the goal. But politicians have tasted what power feels like. Conservative, leftists, statist politicians feel what power is like, whether it's the conservative Johnson, whether it's Orban in Hungary, whether it's the Germans, the French, no matter where it is. And of course, Biden in the United States. They feel what power is like, and they won't let it go. They won't let it go. And of course, they're afraid. They're afraid. It's easy to perceive politicians as these power-lusting, scheming, evil guys. But really, much of what motivates politicians is fear. What if it gets out of control? I might lose the next election. What if I'm perceived as weak? What if I'm perceived as non-scientific? What if I'm perceived? Politicians are motivated by fear and fear of the electorate and fear of how people look at them and fear of what the intelligentsia of what their crowd will think of them, and they panic. So we will see what happens with all of this. But it looks bad in terms of the government's responses. It looks like the government responses to this are pretty uniform across the globe. So it's not the case that this is just a phenomena of the Biden administration, but it looks like this kind of crazy, response, lockdown response, reduced liberty, reduced freedom, shut down airports, don't allow people to travel. Tell them where they can and cannot go, isolate them, put them, whether they test positive or negative, doesn't matter, get them. That kind of mentality is just gonna continue on and on and on. And look, it could be that this variant is more deadly, but from what I'm reading out of South Africa, it doesn't seem that that's the case. The South African health authorities are claiming that it's less deadly, less likely to get you in hospital, particularly if you're vaccinated. But it is very contagious. So let's get it over with. I just heard today from a friend of mine who also hires me to give talks. So I was with her and at an event. What was it? A week and a day ago in Colorado in Connecticut. Basically a week ago. Last Friday, and it turns out that a number of people at that event got COVID. She has gotten COVID. She spent Thanksgiving kind of in isolation, struggling with COVID. I think she's doing fine. She's vaccinated. I think she's fine. One of the other speakers at the event also got COVID. He too, I saw on Facebook. He's vaccinated, but it's a little scary, particularly once you get to a certain age. and he's got COVID. Anyway, I still don't have it. Now, I'm not eager to get it. It's not like I'm eager to get it, but I do find it interesting that I have been traveling throughout. I was traveling in February, March, on airplanes all over the place without many precautions. I was traveling throughout last year, 2020. I was traveling all of this year. My wife had COVID, and I spent an entire week, 10 days, where she had symptoms, and I was with her nonstop, and I didn't get it. I just, I've been lecturing unmasked and where the audience is unmasked for months and months and months. And I'm not encouraging anybody else to do this. This is just what I've done. And I was at this event a week ago where a bunch of people have got COVID and I didn't get COVID. So I'm happy, I'm lucky, whatever it is, I have not been able to get COVID, and I hope that continues. But the reality is that we're probably all going to get it. I mean, deer in Michigan, the entire, significant percentage of the population of deer in Michigan have COVID, and it's likely that human beings will get it back from deer, and this is like endemic, and this is just going to continue, and we'll, to some extent, at some point, we're all going to get it. The tragedy is that nobody seems to be learning lessons from this and improving policy prescriptions for it. The response is just as fearful and as it has always been, right? It's just as fearful. Wanda Freeman says, Yaron has Japanese genes immune to COVID. It might be that I've been traveling so much for so many years that my immune system is well developed, or I've got so many COVID colds that I don't know. Who knows what's going on? And it could be I just got lucky, right? The fact is, the reality is that the most likely answer is Yaron is just lucky. Don't underestimate the role luck in the sense of actually having a low probability event and surviving a low probability event. All right. Anyway, so I just wanted to get everybody up to speed. This is spreading like crazy. Everybody's going to be talking about this new variant of COVID. It's going to be everywhere. Locking down borders is not going to help. Let's hope and fight for a non-lockdown solution in the United States, even if cases accelerate and increase significantly. Let's hope that the response this time is more rational. I would encourage people who are 65 and older who might have comorbidities to get their booster shot. This would be a good time, or maybe wait a few weeks until we know more about this particular variant, and maybe the booster shots could be modified to cover this variant. But this is a great time to consider getting vaccinated and getting your vaccines all caught up, so that if you have comorbidities, if you're susceptible to COVID and susceptible to bad outcomes from COVID, you reduce the odds of those bad outcomes. So I've still not gotten my booster. I don't expect to get a booster until I know more about this new variant and whether the booster is going to be modified or not. All right. One last thing I would say is, where's the outrage that the FDA has not approved the Pfizer and Merck pills that are supposed to reduce basically the risk of death from COVID to zero? Where are these pills? If these pills were circulating, then it wouldn't matter. None of this would matter. It would all be over. So maybe the political class has an incentive for this not to be over, because they're benefiting enormously in terms of the power grab from this. But approve the frigging pills so that we can stop worrying about this. $700 course of the Pfizer, the Merck pill, and you're almost guaranteed not to have a significantly negative effect from COVID. I would take the pills like that. I have no qualms about taking the pill, even if they're only approved for emergency use or whatever the hell they call it. So get the pills out there. All right. No, I'm not using ivermectin. I explained why yesterday. Chances that ivermectin actually works on COVID are very, very low, and there's just absolutely no reason to be using them. The fact is that if I get COVID, chances of me having a really bad outcome are very, very, very low. I'm not going to worry about it, and ivermectin is certainly not the first thing I would jump at. There are other drugs. There's this one antidepressant that taken in small doses has shown significant positive results with COVID, much better results than ivermectin in much better studies. So if you're going to get COVID and you're going to take something, be scientific about it and not political, not jump to whatever the latest fad among the doctors that are cool happen to say. Yes, fluvoxamine, that's it. That's the antidepressant. It's a mild antidepressant. You can take it in low doses, and it is proven of all the different, and it's very cheap. It's for all the different drugs that are being tried that are very cheap, that are approved already, that have no side effects, that are easy to use, that have no issues. Fluvoxamine, it has produced, as far as I can tell, I'm not a doctor, don't take my word for this, as far as I can tell, has produced the best results. And if you take it in the right dose, in low doses, it won't have an effect on your mind, and you can go on and off it easily. So again, this is the one that Scott Alexander and I've read others have said it has the best large, a peer-reviewed, statistically significant study out there, much better. Much more informative than ivermectin. So if I was going to take something, I would take that. All right. Before I go on to smash and grab, which is the main topic I wanted to talk about today, I want to remind you that you can ask questions on the Super Chat. The Super Chat is available right here. It is a way for you to support the show, value for value. I assume you're here because you get value from the show. Those of you listening afterwards, you can express your value to the show. And, holiday season is a great time to express that value, express some gratitude, if you feel gratitude, towards the show, if you listen to it. You can go on YaronBrookShow.com/support. You can go to Patreon. You could go to Subscribestar and make a monthly contribution to the Yaron Brook Show. Again, Christmas time, the holiday season is a great time to do that. I would also encourage you, if you're on the Super Chat, we do have a goal today. That goal is $600 at least. We're at about 40, so just under 40, probably 35. So pick up the pace. And, of course, you can ask me questions about anything you want. And, of course, I appreciate the support, even if it comes, detached from a question. We're trying to make up for the fact that there were fewer shows this month, and trying to make up kind of for the numbers that we got. Yesterday was fantastic, so thank you for all of those who used the Super Chat to support the show yesterday. But so far, 2 questions. We need a lot more questions. And yes, before you leave today, give it a thumbs up if you like the show. If you didn't like the show, that's fine. But if you like the show, give it a thumbs up before you leave. That would be great. Thank you. So we're going through a little experiment right now, particularly in states and localities that have adopted a, let's call it, soft policing stance, particularly on property crimes. If you remember, during the dark days of the summer of 2020, as the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, many of them turned into riots, and some of those riots, in particular, I remember the case in Chicago, turned into out-and-out looting. If you remember, the large mobs looted stores on the Miracle Mile, that's Michigan Avenue in Chicago, stole large quantities of goods from places like, from luxury goods like Louis Vuitton and other places. And Black Lives Matter the next day, I remember, I held a demonstration outside the courthouse demanding that whoever was arrested be released, that this wasn't a crime, shouldn't be viewed as a crime. This was just an attempt to reduce inequality in the culture. That this was just a form of redistribution of wealth. The fact that they stole Louis Vuitton bags would be an opportunity for them to sell those bags, get a little bit of money. And many commentators on the left said, what's the big deal? All these stores have insurance. Why is anybody upset? Insurance companies are evil and large and bad guys. And, these are luxury stores, and only the rich care about these places, and the rich be damned. And everybody thinks income inequality is a bad thing. So this is just a little action to reduce income inequality. When stores were damaged and destroyed in Portland, Oregon during during riots under the guise of the same cause, nobody cared. Nobody cared. It was the attack on the federal building that got Trump all excited. But smash stores, destroy property, nobody seemed to care anywhere. And of course, this was a phenomenon all over the United States, even in Minneapolis, where, of course, the BLM demonstrations started after the George Floyd killing. Even in Minneapolis, when they burnt their own people's stores, when they burned stores in their own neighborhoods, well, they're just expressing themselves. It's a form of expression. At the time, if you remember, the theme was defund the police, or even better, abolish the police. Let's get rid of the police. And I did a whole show on how it was Rousseau's idea that indeed it is civilization and its institutions, including the police, which is part of the institutions of civilization. It is civilization that causes crime. That man, in a sense, in a state of nature, without the institutions of civilization, without reason, science, right, without the constraints of morality, man is violence-free. That is heaven. That is beauty. What corrupts man is his mind, its reason. What corrupts man is capitalism. What corrupts man are the institutions of civilization. What corrupts man is the law. Property rights. If only we could abolish property rights, if only we could abolish the police, everything would be in a state of nature, would be peaceful and wonderful. That is directly out of Rousseau. And of course, we know that Rousseau's ideas inspired the most monstrous of the executioners of the French Revolution, the most bloodthirsty participants in the French Revolution were carried with them everywhere they went. Robespierre, for example, copies of Rousseau's books. So there was a whole movement about defunding the police and getting rid of the police. Now, a lot of that didn't go anywhere, although a lot of defunding happened. Nobody got rid of the police, even in Minneapolis, when they actually took it to a vote with the people. They voted it down just this last month. But the mentality of soft, property crimes don't matter, it's just redistribution, who cares, it's just luxury stores, no big deal. That mentality survived, and indeed got institutionalized in some areas with district attorneys that believed this stuff, that internalized this agenda. Indeed, they were voted in advocating for this agenda. Agenda of, again, no bail, let's release criminals early, property crimes are not real crimes, and the police are the enemy. The police are the enemy. They are the problem for which we need to find a solution. Well, we've seen over the last year and a half now a significant increase in crime. We've seen an increase in violent crime. An increase in spite of the fact that since 1991, I think it is, violent crime has seen an historic, unprecedented decline. From 1991 until about 2018, a dramatic decline in murder, in property crimes, in battery, in all forms of violent crimes and property rights. We saw a dramatic, particularly in murder, dramatic decline. In spite of Donald Trump's claim in 2016 that we had, that there was, what was it? Bloodshed everywhere, and our streets and cities were riddled with crime. That 2016 was very close to some of the most peaceful, devout of criminality periods in American history. But that is starting to reverse itself. Crime is definitely on the uptick. Unsurprisingly, since we started to talk about how property crime are no big deal, how we don't need the police, how we could do really, really well with fewer police, don't need a lot of police. Murder has been a significant uptick, but generally crime has seen a significant uptick. And you can see it over the last few weeks, really over the last week, in what has been going on. Just a few examples, right? So you remember reading that story about this guy who drove his truck through a Christmas parade. I think he killed 6, injured dozens. Some of those injured might still die. A guy who has behaved like this in the past, who has shown homicidal tendencies, and he was out on bail. $1,000 bail. Now you think maybe $1,000 bail, it may have been a victimless crime. Maybe he was caught with possession of some drug. Maybe he was drunk or whatever. No. He was out on bail when he ran down these dozens of people. $1,000 bail for running over the mother of his child. I mean, this is a guy who was using his car as a weapon and had in the past. And for running over his girlfriend in the past or whatever, the mother of his child, he was given $1,000 bail and released. $1,000. And then that was not some freak thing. This guy's been in trouble with the law over and over and over again. And surprise, surprise, he goes on and commits another heinous crime, this time with many victims, unrelated. Now, this happened in a county with a district attorney who's a real progressive, who believes criminals should get a second chance and we shouldn't penalize poor criminals with high bail and we should let them all loose. And we're seeing the same thing in LA, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Minneapolis. But this was in a Milwaukee County. And the consequence is, shockingly, rising crime. $1,000 bail for running over a woman. Purposefully, not accidentally, purposefully. In other words, attempted murder. $1,000 bail. It's mind-boggling. Why would somebody like this be allowed out on bail at all? A headline in the Washington Post described this event where 6 people have died, including an 8-year-old boy, and as I said, dozens were injured. This is the headline. I'm going to butcher the name, I apologize, of the county of the city in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin. The Waukesha Tragedy. caused by a SUV. What can you do but laugh? First of all, it's not a tragedy. Tragedy is like stuff happens. This is like murder. This is like a massive crime. And the SUV didn't do it. I mean, it's one thing to say gun violence, as if guns are violent, right? Because guns are, a tool of violence. That's what they are. Okay, right? Still, somebody had to pull the trigger. But SUVs are now, it's not the person. God forbid we blame anybody because, they're just products of their genes or products of their environment. They can't help themselves. They just are what they are. It's probably systemic racism in one way or another, or systemic poverty, or systemic neglect, or systemically unloved, or whatever systemic thing caused this SUV to do it. I mean, I wonder if the SUV, what color SUV was. Maybe the SUV was like maybe it was orange or something, some horrible color, and people insulted it, and it was feeling insulted, so it decided to run a bunch of people over. Now, as it happened, the guy who actually ran over the people, the guy who ran over his mother, his child, the guy who got out on bail for $1,000, it looks like he's a fan of Adolf Hitler. I mean, one article suggests that in the New York Post. Brook shared pro-Hitler memes, called for violence against white people. That's interesting, that you're both pro-Hitler and anti-white people. I go figure this out. Go figure all this out. It doesn't matter. The guy is a nut, a violent nut, should have never, ever, ever been allowed out on bail. Right? Yeah, he was big on killing Jews. Those are the kind of white people he really wanted to kill, was Jews, right? Anti-cops. So yeah, I mean, this guy was a piece of work, real piece of work. But it's not his fault. It's the SUV did it, the orange SUV. Maybe it wasn't orange. I don't know. You're seeing a pattern. But then, over the last few days, seemingly out of nowhere, it looks like a bunch of people looked at the video of what happened in Chicago last summer, noticed that what happened there is it was a large group of people rushed in, stole a bunch of stuff, rushed out, got in their cars, drove away. Almost nobody was arrested. The ones who were arrested were released with a slap on the wrist because BLM advocated for their cause. Somebody sat down and figured out, I wonder if we can replicate that. All right, so I'm being corrected. It wasn't orange, it was red. Okay, well, if it was red, that makes sense. You'd expect that of a red SUV, right? I'm trying to be funny here. I don't know if it's working. But you'd expect that of a red SUV, Not of a different color SUV. Maybe a red SUV, you could expect that. Anyway, it's as if somebody sat down and figured out, I wonder if we can replicate what happened in Chicago and get away with it. And indeed, if we replicate it, what's the big deal? If we can get enough people to run into a store all at once, grab as much stuff as we can, run outside, get in our cars, and drive away, what are the police going to do? If there's so many of us, how are they going to catch us? If there's so many of us, what are they going to start shooting? They're not going to shoot us because we know what happens if the police shoot. And the security guards are not going to shoot us. They're too afraid to shoot. So we can beat up the security guards, grab as much Louis Vuitton or Best Buy stuff as we can, run into the car, get out of there. And what you're seeing across California, it started in San Francisco, but across California, is flash mobs. You remember the flash mobs where they start dancing, or they start playing music, or they start singing, and it's really, really cool and really, really beautiful? Well, now, these flash mobs, obviously well orchestrated, well planned, well thought in advance, are burglarizing store after store after store in California. Started in San Francisco. San Francisco that has a district attorney that basically is not prosecuting shoplifting. Stores have closed in San Francisco. The first store in which they came in, robbed, and escaped was a Louis Vuitton in Union Square. They've now done it at Best Buy and other luxury stores. This is now spread to Minneapolis, another one of these district attorneys that are very, very soft on property crimes. And there's no end in sight. Some of these mobs are not just attacking the stores, but if there are people around there with shopping bags or bags, they're grabbing the shopping bags, grabbing people's wallets, and running away. Some of them are armed, some of them are not. But they basically, there was one flash mob took on a Home Depot, and they went in and they got sledgehammers and all kinds of equipment so that they could go, I guess, and rob the Best Buy and smash the windows and grab the stuff. And, I mean, looking at my news feed, it's like this is everywhere. For at least a decade now, we have told poor people over and over again that they are victims of the system. That they are poor not for any fault of their own, but because the system makes them poor. The system, by the way, is capitalism. And that the way that manifests itself is through inequality. That inequality was a way in which, nobody ever explains how this works, but it's a way in which the rich, the wealthy, the establishment, the successful have oppressed the poor and kept them down. This has been a popular suggestion, a popular storyline of the left that has been picked up since Trump by the right and has become now just something that everybody accepts. The working class, whether it's white working class, rural working class, whether it's inner city working class, the working class is being screwed by the rest, by the so-called elites. And whether you're right or left, it doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're working class. And the rich don't deserve what they have. It's all at your expense. Whatever they have, they've stolen from you. They don't deserve it. It's not theirs. On top of that, the left, certainly for the last 4 or 5 years, has been aggressively advocating, the far left, an anti-property rights perspective. What is socialism after all? What is Bernie Sanders after all? If not a hater of property rights? When politicians float the idea of having wealth taxes, taxes on unearned capital gains, increasing taxes on the wealthy, everybody knows what that means. That means stealing stuff to redistribute. And then when riots happened last summer, and nobody really condemned them, and when vandalism and burning of stores and explicit, straight-out looting happened, nobody objected. The states, governments, cities didn't do much to stop it. Federal government didn't do much. Again, federal government deployed forces only to protect the federal building. Did nothing. What is the message that's being sent to people? Property rights don't matter. Rich don't deserve what they have. After all, it's just a way of redistributing wealth, theft. When people who shoplift are not prosecuted, so if you steal a little bit, then it's okay, but if I steal a lot, it's not okay. What's a lot? What's a little? Isn't it the case that if I can get away with it, it's okay? When the left and right advocate for nihilism, for not caring about values, for no respect for human life or property, then people learn the lesson. They internalize it. At least the people at the margins. Oh, so we just need to figure out how to do it. When the police are deemed impotent, when the police indeed are told to stand down, when people can riot in places like Kennesaw, burns people down, and the police are told not to intervene, then what the hell? Let's start a riot. And then we'll steal stuff on the side. What all these ideas, what the nihilism, the hatred, the wanting to see the world burn by certain intellectuals who, of course, tell the looters that it's not their fault. Indeed, they are the victims. They're only doing it as a sign of protest against systemic fill in the blank. Systemic discrimination, systemic racism, systemic exploitation. When people tell them that the jobs they have are slavery, are no different than slavery, then they live in a slave society. And it's time to rise up against the slave owners. All the messages people have been getting over the last year and a half have been that the rule of law is unjust and that they should just go implicitly, just go and take what they want. And that's what they're doing. And they figured it out. We'll see how far this spreads around the country. So far, as I said, most of the stories I've seen are in California, where we have very soft attorney generals. I doubt you'll see this in Orange County, in California, but you'll see it in LA County. You'll see it in San Francisco. And you'll see it in places like Minnesota, Minneapolis. This is anarchy. This is what happens when there's no respect for the rule of law, when the police are shackled, when you have no police, or that they're not allowed to do their job. This is what happens when we let criminals out with no punishment. This is what happens when you throw in the towel. And yeah, it's not a consequence of the last year and a half. It's just the last year and a half it's become explicit. Yeah, it's a trend that's been happening for 100 years. As we have eroded any respect for individual rights, as we've eroded any respect for individual sovereignty, as we've eroded any respect for individual agency, as we've attributed all actions to genes and environment and we're all just automatons. And yeah, we go up and down. In the 70s was particularly bad. 80s and 90s were, at least starting in the 90s, crime declined significantly. Trump signed a massive federal prisoner release bill. Yeah, one of the few things that Trump did that was very good, because the kind of people he released was drugs, and that's great. Instead of devoting police resources to protecting Louis Vuitton and to protecting Best Buy, let's go pick up those kids who might be shooting up some heroin or might be smoking some marijuana. Victimless crimes, where victim is themselves Why are we? I mean, the laws against illegal drugs are completely perverting and distorting all of this. But this is the consequence of leftist, anti-capitalist, anti-individualist ideas that have now infiltrated every aspect of our lives and infiltrated both left and right, so they're no longer just leftist ideas. This is the consequence of Kant and Hegel and Marx and the postmodernists and the nationalists and all of them. Or as Stephanie says, of the consequence of the government regulating so much that you can't even sell lemonade without a license. This is what happens. No looting in Puerto Rico. And I don't blame CRT. CRT, I mean, it's shallow to blame the latest three-letter, manifestation among some intellectuals at the top. This idea of you're determined by your genes is an ancient idea. CRT didn't invent it. Indeed, nothing CRT says it invented or is particularly original. It's just the latest manifestation of ideas that have been percolating around since Immanuel Kant, and really even before that. These are just medieval ideas. Corey says, but those drugs make them a danger to society, putting others in danger. Who's in danger because of drugs? I mean, you're in danger because drugs are illegal and therefore people fight over them. But if drugs were legal, they'd be cheap and people wouldn't fight, and crime and death and murder and violence would decline dramatically. And, so no, it's the drugs are not the danger. It's the war on drugs that is the danger. The war on drugs, its consequences inevitably are more crime, more deaths, more destruction, more corruption among the police. I know Corey's being sarcastic, but I'm taking him seriously because I'm sure there are people out there who would be serious about a question like that. All right, let's see. Yeah, Henry reminds me, good time to recommend that people listen to Leonard Peikoff's lecture about what to do about crime. I can't remember when he gave that lecture, but I think it was in the early 90s, before we started to see a sharp decline in crime. Whatever was being done in those days was actually working. Thesey says the war on drugs is causing more waste of money than anything. Sure, but the real problem with the war on drugs is not its cost, but it's the murderous nature of it. The number of people that have died as a consequence. Corey, you did a $50 Australian question, but then you said continued, but I don't see the continuation. Oh, there it is. You continued it with the $5. So of course I didn't notice. I only noticed the 50. That's not right. I mean, I'll pay a lot more attention to the first half of the question than the second half of the question. I appreciate the 55 Australian dollars, and you've already asked another question. And by the way, I'll just remind you all, I won't dwell on it, but I'll remind you that we still have $428 to go before we reach our goal tonight. So those of you asking $5 questions, ramp it up to 20 so we can get to our goal. So Corey says, recently rewatched your Seder interview, Sam Seder. Picked up on the fact that one of the objections to what makes property yours is that it can still physically be stolen from you. And there is no metaphysical phenomena from stopping that. By that logic, next, they'll be saying that murder can be wrong because it is physically possible to kill somebody. Yes, I mean, it is nonsensical. And of course, one of the things they ignore, they evade, is the evil of the use of force and why the use of force is evil. What they evade and ignore, what they reject completely, is the idea that force is evil. To them, force is just one means in which people relate to one another. And if that's the case, what's the big deal about stealing stuff? If force is a legitimate means by which we interact, then, yeah, I can steal your stuff. What they really don't like, and again, really only on the basis of emotion, is violence. And they take violence to mean murder, punching you in the face. But if I can steal your stuff without assaulting you, without physically, bodily hurting you, nothing wrong with that. I mean, in a sense, isn't that what we do? If the world is a zero-sum game, which is what many of them believe, what their infantile economic ideas lead them to believe, if the world is a zero-sum game, then any wealth that is accumulated is stolen. It's at somebody else's expense. If wages are a form of slavery, then the person employing you, your boss, owner of the business, is committing violence against you. You're earning slave wages. They throw around the word slavery as if it has no meaning. To them, the voluntary exchange done under wages, under business agreement, is equivalent to slavery. So, of course, stealing is equivalent to earning, creating, building. Why wouldn't it be? Concepts lose their meaning. And violence is just one way in which we interact. It's just one other way in which we relate to one another, in which we exchange, in quotation marks, values with one another. And since the only real evil, according to some of them at least, is bodily harm against you, if I don't commit bodily harm against you, then I just steal your stuff. What's the big deal about that? It's just stuff. And they drop completely, ignore completely, evade completely. That stuff has to be created, that somebody has to create it, the time and effort to create stuff, the thought, the energy, the time, the life to create it is yours. That they're not just stealing the thing, but they're stealing everything that thing represents, all the value that went into it, all the time, all the money, all the effort that went into that thing that you created. Theft is a direct attack on your life. It is a direct attack on your values. It is a direct attack on your effort, on your time, on your energy, on your mind. It's no less of an attack on you than is violence against you. All right, let's see. Let's see if there's anything related to what we've been talking about. Thessie asks, for $20, why do you think BLM did not stand up for black cops and minorities on the force who died on the job? Well, because they hate the police. Did this undermine their overall organization and mission? Yes. It seems only BLM for certain parts of society. Yeah, no, look, BLM is not, it's not an organization dedicated to, originally the idea was organization dedicated to fighting police abuse. And maybe then it evolved into we're an organization dedicated to fighting police abuse against blacks. And then it kind of became more explicit that what they really were about is we're an organization against police, against capitalism, against the entire system in the world today. We're an organization that wants to completely demolish the existing culture, civilized culture that exists in the world today. We're nihilists who want to bring down the system, bring down the world as it exists today. Some of us are Marxists, some of us are just straight out nihilists, some of us are just straight out racists. But the intellectuals behind BLM were not interested in police violence in particular. They were not interested in police violence and abuse of violence in general. They wanted no police. They wanted to return us to the state of nature. They want us to destroy capitalism. And if you went back to BLM of 2015 when it first was founded, back then they were explicitly anti-capitalist. They then took some of that off their website in order not to alienate certain people, and particularly certain funders who gave them money, who didn't want to fund their explicit anti-capitalist agenda. But BLM was never a good organization dedicated to preserving the rights and protecting anybody, including black people. Because yes, you're right, if you were black police, they didn't care one iota about you. Because you were police, and that was a greater evil. All right, I saw Corey put up another 50 Australian. Thank you, Corey. Corey says, absolutely, except perfect example of the anti-conceptual mentality, yes. Especially when they try to formulate a gotcha. When they smugly asked you how government protects rights, implying no difference between assault and self-defense. I can't remember the actual exchange, so I apologize, I can't remember that. But yeah, but it makes complete sense. And again, I would say that what we're experiencing in the world today, broadly speaking, at least in the United States, but I think this is true, is the anti-conceptual mentality. What did Ayn Rand mean by anti-conceptual? If you think about what makes human consciousness unique, what makes thinking possible, is our ability to conceptualize, ability to abstract, ability to go from concretes, from perceptions to concepts, then integrate and create new concepts on concepts, and create greater and greater and greater and higher and higher and higher abstractions. If you think about a baby very young, very early, they don't abstract. They can't think in terms of abstractions. They don't think. What they can see are just concretes. They just see stuff happening. They can't understand it. They can't experience cause and effect. They can't understand cause and effect. They can't discover cause and effect because that requires a level of abstraction, conceptualizations. An anti-conceptual mentality is a mentality stuck at the perceptual level, stuck at seeing concrete things. For example, if I buy an iPhone, what the anti-conceptual mentality sees, I give Apple $1,000 and I get this thing. It seems to them like it's a zero-sum game. There's no value is being created here. Whatever profit Apple made was at my expense. It can't conceive of the value added to me and how the iPhone is worth much more than $1,000 to me. It can't conceive of the fact that the iPhone doesn't exist unless Apple has profits. It can't conceive of the thought, the effort, the planning, the organization, the coordination that has to go into creating an iPhone. None of that is available to them because all they have is perception. All they have is the things out there. The iPhone, as Wanda Freeman said, it's just a miracle. It just popped out of nowhere. Indeed, the general attitude towards innovation in the world out there by many people is that it just happens. It doesn't require any particular effort. It doesn't require any particular system. It doesn't require any particular principles. It just happens. The inevitability of progress, the inevitability of innovation. You don't need any incentives, motivations, a system that protects property rights. No, innovation just happens, no matter what. So, they are anti-conceptual, and in that sense, Corey, you're absolutely right. One of the great evils in the world in which we live is that people will not rise up, don't make the effort to rise up, and if they, to the conceptual level, to the level of abstractions, they might do it in a particular area of their life, and then completely ignore it in other areas of their life. And I highly recommend reading Ayn Rand on this. She does a brilliant job in her essay, The Anti-Conceptual Mentality, which I cannot remember which of her books it is, but definitely worth reading. Let's see if we have other related questions. Otherwise, I'll just go to the $20 questions. Just a reminder that, again, we're still way short of where we need to be. So if anybody wants to mimic or follow up on Corey with some more substantial contributions rather than $5 at a time, then maybe we have a shot at getting to our goal and making Catherine's evening. But otherwise, you're going to make Catherine very disappointed if we can't get to where we need to go. I appreciate the $5 ones, but let's try to really ramp it up to get to where we need to get. All right. Let's see. Let me see. Okay, Ryan asked, he says off topic, I think there must be many similarities between productive geniuses and autistic geniuses. However, there must also be some distinct differences. Can you offer some examples of similarities and differences? I think the similarities are, wow, I mean, that is not an easy question to answer off the cuff. Let me try. I think all genius requires the same toolkit in a sense. It requires focus on what it is, a clear vision of what you want, and then the ability to mentally focus on creating and producing it. It requires the ability to stay focused. It requires the ability to reason, to think abstractly, to project into the future, to project whatever it is that you're creating and see it manifest in reality out there. Right? That is true of both productive geniuses and autistic geniuses. Whether it's Michelangelo looking at a piece of marble and knowing the form he's going to create in it, evaluating every crack, every seam, the angle of the things, of the seams in the marble, to be able to figure out how the image is going to be inserted, or whether it is a Steve Jobs, imagining what an iPhone will do, approximately what it would look like, and what the steps you have to take to get from where you are to where you need to be. It's that ability to abstract. It's that ability to plan. It's that ability to be unbelievably focused in achieving the goal you have set to yourself. I think that's true of every form of productivity. And remember that autistic geniuses, that they have to be, if they're going to create, they have, that's a form of productivity. And all productivity is this focus and ability to abstract and to know what your goal is, imagine what your goal is, and then develop a plan and work hard, dedicate the time, the effort, the work in order to get to that plan. Reardon with Reardon Mel. He knew what he was going for. And now he's just taking the steps to get there, trying, failing, reevaluating, thinking through, figuring out, correcting, fixing, moving forward. I'm trying to think about the difference. I mean, the difference is the realm in which it is done. The productive genius, the businessman genius, is functioning primarily in the realm of the physical world. It's the realm of shaping, if you will, the material of the world in his image. The artist is primarily, I think, it deals with, I think, two worlds at the same time. Very much kind of a sense of life world, if you will, an emotional world, a world of what are his values, what are the things important to him, at a very abstract, but for the artist experiences it as a very strong emotion, as a very strong passion. And then dealing with how to take that emotion, that passion, and turn it into a physical manifestation, whether it's a sculpture, a painting, or a piece of music. But what that piece of music, what the sculpture, what the painting is doing is projecting onto the world his value judgments, his view of the world. So it's taking that implicit philosophy that he has, the artist has, metaphysical value judgments, implicit fundamental philosophical premises, and projecting them out onto the world. And then the question for him is, well, how do I do it? I mean, now it's very similar to the productive challenge. Okay, this is what I want. So the source of the value, the source of where you're heading for, comes from a different place. It's not any question of, in a sense, what kind of product do I want to see in the world? What do I think would be successful in the world? What I think will enhance productivity in the world? An iPhone, that would be great if everybody had an iPhone. Or I had an iPhone, and this is how it would be used. It's how do I project onto the world my view of man as a hero, man as competent at dealing with reality. So the level of abstraction of what you're trying to project is different. But the process of projecting it, of making it real, is very similar. Both require real skills. You have to know how to paint. You have to know how to manage. You have to know how to produce. Artists also, the one other difference, I think, there's a lot more reliance on other people for productive genius, for Steve Jobs-like person, Bill Gates-type person. An artist's job is very lonely. Now, with the exception maybe of an actor or a director or a producer on stage or in film. But most art is done in solitary. That's a difference. I don't know how important it is. Jacob, thank you, $50. That's incredibly generous. Really appreciate it. That gets us. Where does that get us? All right. That goes past the halfway mark, so we're still looking for about $250 to get us to where we need to be. So I need a few more Jacobs to pitch in with $50 questions. But Jacob says, happy Thanksgiving. Planning on introducing someone close to me to Objectivism. I think it could really help her life like it has mine. That's great. Any tips? She's from Taiwan, so has duty beaten into her. Thinking rather than religion. It's quite odd to me. Yes, it's duty and it's family. So the whole, you don't have Jesus, which is great, makes life easier. You don't have a kind of altruism that is universal. You have, to the extent that you have altruism, it's more to your family, which I think is healthier. So I think I generally think the Asian cultures should be more open to Objectivism because of the lack of particularly Christianity. I'd suggest the Fountainhead, particularly if she is a creative, entrepreneurial spirit, a thinker, then I would definitely recommend starting with the Fountainhead. Or if you wanted the nonfiction, The Virtue of Selfishness, this idea that your life is yours. Ask about any duty the simple question of why? Why? So, Ayn Rand has a good essay, thanks Rob, called Causality versus Duty, which where she undercuts, disproves the whole duty premise. The whole duty premise. So good luck. But Fountainhead, Virtue of Selfishness, you should read Causality versus Duty before you talk to her. Don't have her read it. It's a little too advanced. It assumes too much context, I think, for somebody fresh to start out with that. But I do think after the Fountainhead, it's things like that would be good to read. But just the question of why. Why is your life not yours to live as you see fit for your own benefit and for your own happiness? Why? Why not? Give me a reason why that would be bad. All right, Catherine is doing a courageous job in trying, really trying. You guys need to help her out. A few more questions. You know, if we just got, I don't know, 12 questions at $20 each would be where we need to be. So please step in and help us out here. Okay, Thessie asks, why is it called Black Lives Matter then? Has to be renamed. Someone should sue them for false advertising. You can't sue for something like this. Only those who have been victims of police brutality matter. Name needs to be changed. Message is false. Of course the message is false. It's been false from the beginning. They lie, just like everybody else lies. Almost everybody else, not everybody else. Names don't mean anything. You have to look behind the name. You have to look at what's actually being said or being done or being promoted. And Black Lives Matter was never really about black lives. It was about a leftist, to large extent nihilist, anti-capitalist agenda. So don't be shocked by the fact that people lie. They do. That's the reality in which we live. All right, James asked, what do you think about the metaverse? Is spending most of one's life with a virtual reality helmet compatible with Rand's vision of human greatness? No, but look, human greatness doesn't mean climbing up mountains. It means creating and building and inventing. And the fact is that building, creating, and inventing is going to be done differently in 50 years than it's done today, and today it's being done differently than it was done 100 years ago. So, you know, today we sit opposite a computer screen and we write code and we develop and create stuff that is unique and exciting and different and a huge achievement. And some of that will be done, you know, using some kind of glasses, goggles, whatever you want to call it. I don't think that is, the form that technology takes is what matters. But we have to also recognize the fact that we live in a real world. We eat in the real world. We have sex in the real world. Much of what we do, much of what we gain benefit from is in physical matter in the real world. And that it is important for us to stay connected to that real world. And you can't eat virtually. I guess you could put in you can get in an infusion and just play video games all day. Or just be with that helmet on and not have to go out and eat. But that is I don't think that is going to be a life worth living. One has to be engaged with the world, not just its representation, which is what the metaverse is. It's the representation of reality. One has to have a connection to reality. So I don't think that humanity is going to just be stuck in a metaverse. But I do think we're going to have more of it. I mean, every new technology is resisted. I mean, how many parents thought their children were going to go brain numb, if not brain dead, because of television? And now, I don't know, because of computers, and now because of the iPad, and next because of Facebook, and next because of the Oculus goggles that they wear. So I don't believe the metaverse will survive a healthy culture. Now, the problem is the culture is not healthy. We know that. So, what we need to do is fight. Not fight the metaverse. Fight for positive values. Fight for reason. Fight for living with the capital L thing. Right? Fight for values. And yes, I think all of us will, in the long run, benefit from and benefit from this virtual reality, this ability to manipulate object. I mean, people can do surgeries from afar now, which is pretty amazing. With robots. I think more and more of that's going to happen, and more of that is probably good, up to a limit. You still have to go out and engage with other people, engage with reality, engage in enjoying one's food and enjoying the things that one can create within reality. That doesn't mean we negate one part of reality, which is the virtual, which we create. Whatever, asked me if I've tried virtual reality. I mean, a long time ago. I'm sure it's much, much better, much more intense today. But I don't find virtual reality that interesting. I don't find games that interesting, computer games, or whatever you call them today. I guess they're not computer games anymore. And I also know they're addictive, and one of the reasons I resist them and stay away from them. All right, same person asked, sorry to return to this. I watched Squid Games. Seems it was in the tradition of Lord of the Flies, portraying humanity as innately as evil by placing its character in a fantastically setting that is ultimately meaningless. I think that's right. But it's not meaningless in a sense that the meaning is evil. The meaning is the innate evilness of human beings. But here there was an additional twist on it, because clearly it was against money and against wealth. And it clearly had this additional ancient message, which is, money corrupts, and a lot of money corrupts a lot. So the corruption of wealth, the corruption of money, and ultimately the corruption of capitalism, although that's less of the theme. And just as I said, the theme was just the evil that is human nature, human beings. And that there are no real good guys, not who can survive. So yes, I agree with you on Squid Games. I'm sorry. And I thought it was a painful experience, a horrible series, a gratuitous violence. And I'm sorry you watched it in spite of my recommendation not to. But some people enjoy that stuff. I despise it. What do you think of, Ali asks, what do you think of this statement? Believe in science and follow science. I find it wrong. By all means, since science is a tool, not something to believe in. I mean, what does it mean that science is a tool, right? So, science is the discovery of knowledge in the physical world, right? It's discovery of knowledge in the physical world, of how the physical world works. To the extent that science is discovering knowledge, I believe in that science. I believe in knowledge. Knowledge is important. And sometimes I don't know the knowledge. I believe it because I don't have the time to prove it to myself. So I don't think belief here is out of context, right? I believe my doctor even sometimes when I don't completely understand what she's talking about because I don't have the full context of her knowledge about it. And in that sense, I'm believing the science. And yes, you should follow the science. The question is, you should always ask yourself, is it science? That is, science is the discovery of knowledge about the physical world, right? So you don't want to turn science into religion in the sense that, or not so much science into religion, because you can't do that. You don't want to turn the scientists into religious figures where you believe everything the scientist says. You've always got to have a mind. The scientists could be wrong. They could be maliciously wrong, or they could just be wrong. They could just be mistaken. So you want to treat science like every other piece of human knowledge. You want to evaluate it, whether it's true or false. But sometimes you're not going to have the tools to evaluate its truth or falsehood. And you're going to have to make a case for, given my knowledge of this doctor, given my knowledge of the state of the science, this makes sense to me even though I can't prove it, even though I don't know it 100%. I know it, it seems reasonable enough for me to act on it. I don't know the science behind my computer. I know elements of it. I know pieces of it. But yeah, the science seems to work. I believe in whatever the science is that's behind this. And in a sense, I follow the science. It says, press the button there and it'll turn on. Yeah, I press the button there and it turns on. So, you know, you've got to think for yourself. You've got to observe for yourself. You've got to research for yourself. And the more important the science is to your life, medical, for example, the more research you should do to independently verify it. But you can't learn and know everything. So to some extent, yeah, I'm fine with believing the science and follow the science. Just make sure that it is science, that it is knowledge. I believe in knowledge and I follow knowledge. What else is there? No, I'm not following science. I'm following whatever I feel like today. I'm not following science. I'm following Joe. I'm not following science. I'm going to follow voodoo. I'm going to make it up as I go along. Well, what else is there other than knowledge? Science is one form of knowledge. So I think one of the great tragedies of COVID, of the whole populism, one of the great tragedies of populism that have manifested themselves more so in COVID than ever before, is, on the one hand, the disrespect we have for science, for experts, for people who are studying and experts in a particular realm. And on the other side, certain people choosing which scientists to listen to, because of course scientists don't always agree, and using what they believe is the majority view as dogma. And both sides undermining what real science is and how it should really deal with science. Corey says, science at the end of the day ultimately boils down to sense perception. Yeah, if you boil it all down, but you know, it's hard. There can be no break in the chain from abstract to direct perception. Yes, I think that's right, but that is not simple, right? We can't see atoms. We can't see them. There's no sense perception that gives us atoms. But we can abstract to atoms through the help of observing things with our senses, physical phenomena that are observable to the senses. And then doing experiments which are observable to instruments which were developed based on what was observable, and ultimately using all that plus math to understand the existence of atoms and how they behave, even though we can't actually see them. We can't actually directly observe them through our senses. So yes, everything should be observable to our senses. That is hard, is my point. It's hard to make those connections. And the same in biology. We don't see the molecules. We can't observe directly all the cells in our body and what a particular medicine is doing to all our cells in our body, or what a vaccine is doing. We know how it works. We can see it under the microscope. We don't know how it works in the environment of the body. That's why you run tests. What's observable is the response, and we can, from our observations, we can abstract an explanation. But those explanations could be wrong because we're not observing them directly. This is why it's so important to have a chain of reasoning, to be able to follow a chain of reasoning, to test the chain of reasoning, to challenge the chain, continuously challenge that chain of reasoning. All right, let's see, any other $20 questions? Yes, James. Did the viral enable more nationalism, workforces, and stop global work expansion? It appears that on one hand, that a worker working from home can work anywhere. So why not hire anywhere? Will this be an employer revolution? It's very difficult to hire people anywhere. I mean, in theory, that sounds amazing. But let's say I want to, the Brook Media and Consulting, that's the company that runs this podcast and YouTube channel. Let's say Brook Media and Consulting wants to hire somebody in California and have them work for me from California as an employee. Well, now, I, in Puerto Rico, have to now abide by California law. I have to do all of the things that California law demands of me vis-a-vis that employee. I probably have to file for taxes in California, at least on a portion of the income, that portion that they can attribute to the employee in California. And then if I hire somebody in California and then I hire somebody in New York, now I have another state, another set of regulations, another set of controls, another set of taxes that BMC has to abide by. So you pick any state you want. You think Texas doesn't have employment regulations? You think Florida doesn't? Everybody does. Everywhere does. And each one of them are different. And therefore, each one of them, if you have employees in different states, you're going to have to. So it's not that easy. Now, if you add to that different countries, Austin, Texas has employment regulations. Texas is not a free market. Texas is relatively highly regulated, more highly regulated, for example, than Florida. I think it ranks in the top 10 of least regulated states in the country, but I don't think Texas is in the top 5. So hiring people all over the place is very difficult, very complicated because of statism. If we lived in a world, in a true free market, absolutely, you could hire anybody anywhere. Now imagine if I hired somebody in France or in Thailand. There are all kinds of regulations there. International taxes I have to worry about. Moving money across country lines. None of this is easy because statism, government, makes it very difficult. And you're right that COVID has expanded nationalism, has grown the nationalist tendency. Populism generally has, and then COVID has just encouraged populism even more. And that is going to stop global work expansion. It's going to stop trade. It's going to stop the massive benefits of globalization. Massive benefits of globalization. And that's a great tragedy. Because COVID, populism has driven up nationalism, but it's also COVID is then people live under the illusion that they need supply chains closer to home. They need to produce more stuff at home for national security reasons and to be healthier and all this bullshit. And we can't trust these people, can't trust those people. It just enhances all of that. I can only trust my neighbors. I can only trust people with the same culture, the same color skin, or whatever. All right. Oh, Corey keeps on coming. That's great. Ali, thank you. That's great. Ali says, thank you for the answer. But what's so-called science, like global warming and string theory, have zero experiment to prove it, and has tens of thousands of papers. Also, some university promoting bad health habits because it is environment friendly. Yes, there's a lot of bad science. There is, unfortunately, a lot of bad, or better than bad science. There's a lot of pseudoscience. There's a lot of stuff that presents itself as if it's science, but it's not. So you have to be able to differentiate and distinguish between science and non-science. This is why you shouldn't worship scientists. But you should have a lot of respect for science, real science. String theory is not science. String theory is math detached from reality. Did I swear? Alan is putting money in the swear jar. I don't remember swearing. Maybe Alan swore and he has to put money in the swear jar. So don't confuse the field, science, with the people, with their personalities, with their agendas, with their politics, with what they're pushing, with what they're advocating for. And not everything that people call science is science. String theory, for example, is not physics. It's mind games. So it's your responsibility to figure out if you care, right? If you're going to follow science, respect science, it's your responsibility to figure out what is science and what isn't. Again, string theory is not science. Climate change is a mixture of science and BS, right? And you have to figure out, even with climate change, what is BS and what isn't. And a lot of the reason you get a lot of this stuff is because of statism, because the government sponsors research about things that are meaningless, that scientists get funding for projects that mean nothing and have no usability and lead to nothing because the government is granting funds, and you get a complete perversion. Government funding of science perverts science and creates a lot of pseudoscience. But don't confuse pseudoscience with science. Real science is worth believing in and following. What's the alternative? Again, I ask you, what's the alternative to following science? For example, nutrition. Do you want to follow science or do you want to follow urges, hunches, emotions? It's all emotions at the end. Mystical revelations, the Bible, it says don't eat a cow with its mother's milk. Not a cow, a calf with its mother's milk. And the Jews have a whole convoluted, perverted, distorted, bizarre view about what is kosher and what is not, partially because of this one little sentence in the Old Testament. So they don't eat meat and milk at the same time. All it said is about its mother's milk, not in principle. All right. Corey, I totally forgot to ask this question, he says. But it's good you remembered. I've been meaning to ask for a while. What do you think of the saying, ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially in today's heavily regulated world? I think that it is a complete distortion and perversion and immoral and a tool of the authoritarians to rule over our lives. They purposefully create laws that you cannot understand, that you cannot follow, that you cannot even read, that you can't know. Who's read Dodd-Frank from beginning to end? A few lawyers. So, of course, we're ignorant of the law. Do I understand the tax code? No. Do I understand every aspect of every regulation that out there that applies to me? No. And I can't. And there's no way for me to do it. This is the evil of statism as it exists today. All statism, but particularly of the regulatory state. So no, of course, ignorance of the law is an excuse. Now, in a proper society, in a rational society, where the law is not complex, it's fairly straightforward. It mainly is, I won't say just, but it mainly is, right, the protection of property rights, protection of individual rights. Laws are written in plain English, not legalese. Generally, laws, anybody in the, any civilian should be able to read them and understand them. Then I would agree with the ignorance of the law is no excuse. If you're engaged in a particular activity, know what laws relate to that activity. But that places a burden on the people writing the laws, and that they write the laws in ways that are understandable to us. Right? Ways that are understandable to us. Okay. And we don't have that today at all, not even close. So that would be a great achievement if we got to that point. And only then would that, ignorance of the law is no excuse would be applicable. Hopefully that answers your question, Corey. Quickly, Ali says, maybe follow reason supported by science. Yeah, but what is science? Proper science, which I assume is proper science, is reason. It's the application of reason to solving particular problems. The problems of explaining the material world. So science is reason manifest in the exploration of the physical world. It's not some separate thing. There's reason and there's science, and as long as I use reason to understand science, I'm okay. Well, you should use your reason in trying to understand what the science is. But it's not two different things. I mean, it is in the sense that science is one application of reason. So yeah, I like follow reason supported by, well, just follow reason. Respect science. I love science. I follow science once I know that it's science, that it's knowledge, that it's not pseudo. And once I understand it, that's where my reason comes in. So you never do anything without reason. Adam, thank you. That's very generous. I appreciate the support. What do you think of companies that hire people in other states and countries to work for them, meet all the local regulations, etc.? Would you agree that the future of elementary education is companies that do this for pods of tutoring students? Okay, I'm trying to understand the question. It's not super clear. What do you think of companies that hire people in other states and countries to work for you? Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. I think those are great. These are outsourcing companies, companies that specialize in doing this for you. They deal with the regulations, they pay, they pay the benefit, you pay them, and they take care of the benefits and the regulations, and they take care of all of that. Yeah, I think that's great, but of course, it costs you money. They don't do it for free. So it's a transaction cost, and then the question is it worth it? Some places it is, sometimes it isn't. But it's a cost that in a free society we wouldn't have to bear, right? Would you agree that the future of elementary education is companies that do this for pods of tutored students? I think that's part of the future of education, or of the future of elementary education. I also think the future of elementary education is in private schools like Higher Ground that are based on a rational curriculum. I think the future of education is also in people developing good curriculum and trying to infiltrate even the normal schools. But I think it's in private education that is guided by a rational curriculum. And some of that could be pods, where you get 6, 7 kids together and they study together. Maybe it's online. That's one form. It's very difficult to scale that. It's very difficult to get that on scale, pods. But it is a way to alter education. But I think generally private education and alternatives and experimentation and different ways of delivering education is the future. All right. Let us see. Okay, so we are short basically $80. So it would be nice if we got 40 $20 questions. Not 40, 4 $20 questions. And we'd be able to reach a goal for the day. That would be terrific. We wouldn't want to make this the only day where we miss our goal. I still got a lot of Super Chat questions, but they're all at kind of the $5 and $10. I think I've done all the $20 ones. Those of you who have additional questions, please, no more $5 questions, $10 questions. Let's try to make them all $20 questions, and let's make sure we get at least 4. You can also make a contribution to the Yaron Brook Show without asking a question. That's cool too. We're looking right now for about $80 to get to our $600 target. All right, Zhao from Brazil asks, what are your thoughts on free will? I like it, I have it, you do too. What can I argue with the determinist that he understands my position? You introspect, you can, if you properly introspect, you can experience the fact that you choose. And that you can also experience the fact, if you follow your day and you really introspect, that your primary choice, the fundamental choice is to focus on the question or not. No, I could easily just fade out of it. To focus or not to focus your mind, to elevate your consciousness, put it into a focused state, into a state of full awareness. Yeah, I have evidence for free will. I can see it. Do I have evidence that this pen exists? Yeah, I can see it. Do I have evidence of free will? Yeah, if I introspect, I can see it. I highly recommend, because I'm not an expert on free will, there's a number of videos that have been made with some philosophers on the Ayn Rand Institute website, Ayn Rand Institute YouTube channel on free will. You get a lot of really good examples and discussions. There's even a video, I think, Ayn Rand versus Sam Harris on YouTube. Ayn Rand versus Sam Harris vis-a-vis free will is on YouTube, right? So check that out. I'm happy to engage here on it if it was earlier in the evening, but it's better to get it directly from the philosophers. All right, guys, somebody has to come in with a $80 Super Chat question so we can all go to bed. Okay, so it's we got Frederick. Thank you, Frederick. Appreciate it. Okay, Michael asks, what gave you the impression the judge was biased for Rittenhouse? I think he rightly called out the prosecution for commenting on the defendant's post-arrest silence. Yeah, I think he justifiably called out the prosecution on several occasions. But I also think that he, on a number of occasions, and I cannot remember the specifics, I just remember the impression I had at the time, that on a number of occasions at that time, he made comments that suggested that, that he seemed to have an opinion about this case already wrapped up. That's fine. A judge can have that opinion if it doesn't affect his decision making. I don't think this case will be appealed. I don't think the prosecutor is going to challenge that the judge did a good job in spite of being maybe somewhat biased, but I do think he made some comments to suggest that he had made up his mind. I can't remember the details of the comments. I apologize. Frederick, thank you. Frederick is kind of trickling the money in to get us to where we need to go. He's challenging Catherine's ability to add and to do math. It's good. It's good. You keep Catherine on her toes. Michael asks, in an objectivist court system, would there be defense attorneys and prosecutors, or would you have a panel of judges trying to find out the facts? Look, I don't know. I'm not a philosopher of the law. I don't have a strong view here. Leonard Peikoff, who thought about this a lot more than I have, who is smarter than I am, and certainly knows objectivism better than I do philosophically, is of the opinion that some kind of panel of judges, some kind of French system that does not have an adversarial relationship between the defense attorneys and the prosecutors would be more consistent with the idea of justice. And I find it very difficult to disagree with Leonard Peikoff on issues like this. And he's made the case. And if you're interested, I think he talks about it on a photo forum talk right after the O.J. Simpson trial. And I think on his podcast or the talk that he gave about the O.J. Simpson trial, I think he discussed the weaknesses of a jury-based system there. So that's my view, but I would suggest that there is no formal objectivist position on it. And I would suggest that as we approach the free society, this is the kind of work that philosophers of law inspired by objectivism would have to grapple with in order to set up the legal system in this ideal society of the future. Michael says, don't seek revenge, the rotten fruit will fall by themselves. Aristotle said that. Yeah, but I don't see why revenge is bad. I'm a fan of revenge if you can do it without sacrificing your values, without diverting your attention for what's important in life. I love revenge stories. I love the Count of Monte Cristo and other type of revenge stories. I think seeking out justice is important. Yes, they will suffer, but if I can expedite that suffering and I can make that suffering just a little bit greater, and if I can make sure the justice is played out, why not? So don't sacrifice your life, your values for revenge. But as I've told you before, I'm a believer in hate. I believe these negative emotions are there for a reason, and they're healthy, and they're good for you. Some people deserve it. Some revenge is justified, and sometimes revenge is sweet. We've only got $53 to get to our goal. So Frederick could trickle in $53, maybe. Or we could just get somebody to step in with a $50 contribution or a $50 super chat question. Any one of those would work. Or 3 people could do $20 each. 5 people could do $10 each. That would work too. Why don't you like the sport of boxing? Look, I don't like sports that shed blood. I don't like the violence. I don't like the celebration of violence. I don't think it's civilized. I abhor violence. I think violence is essentially anti-production, anti-everything. As Wanda Freeman says, boxing often results in brain damage. That's horrible. I can't think of, that's what violence does. Violence is brain damage. But here, it's physically brain damaging. It's why I've stopped, not completely, but mostly watching football, American football, because of the brain damage that American football causes. I don't think it is rational or noble. Wrestling, not the funny sort, the Olympic type wrestling. is physical. It's physical superiority. It's got technique. It's got all that. But there's no bloodshed. Blood does not flow. It's not violence against somebody else in the sense that boxing, MMA, all these other sports are. I'm fine with practicing boxing, practicing martial arts for self-defense, but not as a sport, because I think it's not. I don't think it's a sport. It's not entertaining to see people bashing each other's brains out and causing brain damage to the other side. I think that's barbaric. Corey, thank you. I think Corey said us. I think Catherine is figuring out the Australian dollars and the exchange ratio, which changes day to day, and I think all the exchange ratios changed quite dramatically on Friday with the dramatic drop in the stock market and dramatic drop in Bitcoin and huge changes in relative value of different currencies. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Frederick. I think we're over the 600 by this point, but Catherine will update us once she does all the transactions. She's got to transfer the shekel into dollars. She's got to get Australian dollars into American dollars. She's working hard in the back somewhere there to get it all right. Okay, Andrew asked for $20. Do you think the main problem today with relying on statistical analysis is widespread ignorance of statistics, or widespread non-objectivity of in the motives of intellectuals? Well, both, of course, because the intellectuals don't have any incentive because of their motives. They don't have any incentives in teaching us, educating us, guiding us towards a proper understanding of the statistics they're using. They have an incentive, a powerful incentive, to use the statistics against us and to use our ignorance against us. And whenever you're ignorant, the fear is it's going to be used. But from an individual perspective, so many of us buy into statistics out of ignorance and out of a certain tribalism, a following of authority, because the statistics reaffirm what we already think. But statistics are hard. They require reasoning. They require thinking. They require knowledge, like everything else. They require knowledge. And you need to educate yourself, because if you could trust the intellectuals, they could interpret it for you. And they would tell, look, this is what the statistics means. But you can't trust them. Now, some of them you can't trust because they're idiots, or because they don't know statistics either, which makes them idiots in a sense. Some of them you can't trust because they're non-objective, and because they have evil motivations, or because they're purposefully deceiving you. But the fact of reality is today, since you cannot trust the intellectuals to tell you what the stuff really actually means, if in a sense what the science actually means, because science, particularly in healthcare, is so much driven by statistics, that you have to know a little bit yourself. I'm going to do a show on what's his name, on Steven Pinker's book. We'll talk about more about statistics when I do the show. Frank, thank you, Frank, for the $20. We're well over the 600, 665 now. That's great. Thank you, guys. This is fantastic. Is habeas corpus the original right that detached the law from the state and protected the individual? I mean, I think habeas corpus is in the Magna Carta. I think generally the Magna Carta is the beginning of a recognition of a law that is beyond men, that is a law that has objective status and does not depend on the king or the aristocrats or anybody like that to dictate it, right? So habeas corpus is certainly part of that, because it's part of that Magna Carta, which was the first place. Now, you could argue that in at least the Jewish tradition, there is a certain aspect of the law having that relationship even before the Magna Carta. And indeed, much of British common law, there's some school of thought that attributes much of English common law to a certain study and respect for the Talmud, the Jewish Talmud, which is very similar to common law. If you read it, it has similar attributes to common law. So it could be that is the origins, but certainly in the Western tradition, it is the Magna Carta, and the habeas corpus, I think, is in that Magna Carta and represents part of that achievement. A moral pancake asked the $20 question. South Africa is coming up on 6 months since the Zuma riots. 340 deaths, 10 malls burned, $2 billion of property damage during the looting. There was very little learned. Do you see this possibly happening in America? Yeah, I do, unfortunately. I think as respect for private property, as respect for capitalism, as respect for freedom, as respect for individualism, as respect for the rule of law diminish, and they certainly did in South Africa over the last 20 years, under a pseudo-Marxist regime of the ANC. As that happens in America, we will see more looting, more damage, more riots, more deaths, more property damage. I don't think, look at what's happening right now with the smash and grab. It just encourages the nihilists. It gives them the courage, if you will, to go out and do it. Smash and burn and destroy. Knock everything down. All right, Michael, when it comes to dating, don't play hard to get, play hard to forget. Okay, I'll buy that. Dean writes, sorry, just $10 today. Was Israel acting pragmatically by making peace with Egypt? When is making peace okay? And if Egypt work, why peace with Hamas and Palestinian National Authority won't work? You have to make an assessment about whether the other party is sincere or not, whether they have a real interest or not, and whether they are willing to make certain commitments that express that sincerity. I think in the case of Egypt for Israel, it was a cautious peace. It would have been a mistake to celebrate that peace as the be-all, end-all, because while Sadat seemed to be motivated, have the right intentions, really want peace, the culture from which he came was not ready for peace, didn't really want the peace, and indeed killed him about a year after the peace was established as a reflection of that fact. And Israel still has, quote, peace with Egypt, but that could flip on a dime because Egypt is fundamentally unfree and there's only so much you can do with an unfree country. But it didn't cost Israel much to have peace with Egypt. And Israel was not in a position to defeat Egypt. And therefore, peace with Egypt under those circumstances, given Sadat's seeming sincerity, made sense. Now, it cost Sadat his life, and he was a very brave man for attempting it because it was quite clear that he put his life in danger. Now, why can't you have peace with Hamas and the Pacific National Authority? Because they clearly don't want peace. They clearly are committed to violence. They clearly are committed to destroying Israel. They're clearly committed to war. And their ideology, everything about them, is committed to violence. And therefore, there's nobody to do peace with. There's no other side in the case of Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. You can't deal with people committed to violence. Sadat seemed and persuasively convinced Israelis that he had changed, that he was now no longer committed to violence. But even if Hamas recognized the right of Israel to exist, but still was committed to using violence, you cannot negotiate with them. You cannot negotiate with the side committed to violence. Tessie asks, they don't want to see the world burn, they want to have bureaucratic power over it to feel important. Some of them Some of them are just power lusters. Some of them want to see the world burn. Many of them want to see the world burn. And one of the ways, they won't admit that to themselves. They pretend they want bureaucratic power over it so they can make it, quote, better. But what they really want is to see it burn. And as things deteriorate under their watch, they enjoy it and they love it. So there is the explicit motivation, there's the implicit motivation. Low Legard legend says, slavery is taking on one's right to autonomy. That is the definition. Most government force is as immoral as slavery. We must define it this way. No, I don't think so. I think you have to be able to define different levels of subjugation. The state, through taxes and through government force, subjugates you to a point. Slavery subjugates you a lot more. Slavery is an extreme form, a consistent, unmitigated form of subjugation. I think it's a mistake to conflate them. I think it's an injustice to slaves. Slavery is much worse than what you have it today with the regulatory state. Corey, thank you. Really appreciate that. He's brought us up to 700. Catherine just made Catherine's day. She achieved her goal. Scott writes, do you think Fauci has done a decent job generally in managing COVID response? Are there significant disagreements you have with him? No, I don't think Fauci's done a good job. I think he's done a lousy job. I think Fauci is a scientist, from everything I can tell, a good scientist, but not a good policy guy. And he shouldn't be a policy guy. Scientists shouldn't be dictating policy. Scientists shouldn't be involved in decisions about lockdowns, mandates, mask mandates, children in school, opening school, closing schools. They can voice opinions, but they shouldn't be in a position of power to dictate any of that. Those are political decisions. Fauci's a lousy politician. He's a lousy central planner. So is pretty much everybody. I disagree with Fauci on lockdowns. I disagree with Fauci on children in school. I disagree on Fauci on children getting vaccines. I disagree with Fauci on a lot of things. Because I think he's taken on the role instead of giving us the science. Okay, if children go to school, here are the risks, here are the benefits. That's what a scientist would do. Scientist has no business recommending or being in a position of dictating policy. What does the science say about children going to school? How many will get infected? How bad will it be? How many will die? How many of them will go home and infect their grandparents or their obese parents? Those are the questions science gives us an indication about. What to do about it, how to respond. That's politics. Now you have to take into account individual rights, the role of government, the government power, what kind of government powers the government should have, what is feasible, what is not feasible, what is right, what is not right. Those are completely different considerations. So the problem is that the Trump administration completely defaulted on its political responsibility in dealing with COVID. It completely blew it in the first 3 months of the pandemic, handed over the reins basically to Fauci and his committee to say, do, manage whatever they wanted to. The political part of the White House completely defaulted and disappeared. Whenever Trump would come out and talk about COVID, it was nonsense. And then, this is after 2 months of denying that even was a problem even existed, and not, letting the CDC doing the stupidity that the CDC did, and so on. So, Fauci has a incredibly respected history as a scientist. I think as a policymaker, with regard to this crisis, or with regard to any crisis, he is a disaster, and he shouldn't be in that position. And particularly given that it's all politicized and he's playing the political game, and I don't know why he does it. I would have quit if I was Fauci, to be put in that position. Okay, last question. Could you recommend some books and movies about honor? Wow. Wow. I mean, the most powerful story about honor, the two most powerful stories about honor are plays. And that's all I can think of right now. I'll make a note of myself to try to think of others for a future show. But a couple of ones from plays, from drama. Antigone and El Cid. Both, by the way, part of Leonard Peikoff's 8 great plays. El Cid is about honor, and Antigone is about honor. So I recommend both of those plays. El Cid is made into a movie, but I don't think the movie is that good. I don't think The Godfather is about honor. It's not the theme of The Godfather. I don't think it's even a main theme of The Godfather. Godfather has a, anyway. Cyrano. Yeah, Cyrano's a good one. Cyrano, you can watch the movie. Cyrano is definitely one of the themes is honor, no question. Right, so you got 3 plays. Cyrano, El Cid, and Antigone. I don't think The Scarlet Pimpernel is primarily about honor. I mean, it's a great story. It's a great movie. Is Mr. Sunshine about honor? Mr. Sunshine is about the conflict between value. I don't think honor is the value in Mr. Sunshine. The Count of Monte Cristo, Mulan, Heston, I don't know. Monavana, I don't think it's the theme is honor. I mean, the bad guy, her husband, is all about honor, but he's the bad guy. All right, Good Will Hunting. No, I don't know. I don't know why you think all these movies are about honor. I'll think if I can see other ones. Ivanhoe, maybe Ivanhoe. That's a book. One of my favorite books, by the way, Ivanhoe. I love that story. Leonard Peikoff doesn't. So just to be objective about this, Leonard Peikoff does not like Ivanhoe, never liked it, but I loved it. It's Last of the Mohicans about honor. Les Miserables, I don't think is about honor. It depends what you mean by about. Is that the main theme? I don't think that's the main theme. Mr. Jones, wow. Yeah, I mean, basically every movie. I'll think about it. All right, guys. It's been a long show, over 2 hours now. All right, I need to go. It's late here. It's already 10 o'clock over here in Puerto Rico. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you for all the incredibly generous super chatters. We made our targets. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. Don't forget to use the holiday season to increase your monthly support or to begin your monthly support to the Yaron Brook Show at yaronbrookshow.com/.